Dungeons & Dragons has long held a tradition of good versus evil. Which will win today? Welcome to part 2 of a D&Dummies adventure, where we watch the people fight Wizards of the Coast, the parent company and official license holder of Dungeons & Dragons.
Yeah, which is technically itself owned by Hasbro.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So you would say that they have a monopoly on tabletop RPGs.
Yeah, which is weird. They also own the Ouija board.
So they have a Satan. Anyway, I'm the dummy. This is Dan, in case you couldn't figure out where the naming convention comes from. He knows about D&D. I don't. And when last we met, if you haven't listened to it, go back.
Yeah. Brief recap. Wizards of the Coast.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Hasbro made a post saying, hey, we're not making enough money on D&D. It's worth this much, but we're only making this much on it. And people were like, you charge $60 for a PDF. I think you're doing fine. But then they tried to make it where they changed the open game license, or OGL, to where it's like, oh, you have to get approval from us to make things. And they hid it behind NFTs and other companies trying to make that, but that was never an issue.
Yeah, they claimed they were doing this to stop NFTs, which is generally like a good PR move, but then there were never any NFTs, and they were just doing it for more money.
And the fact they were taking a percentage of it, like, I think it was a hefty chunk of a percentage.
And this didn't just impact people who were making tabletop content, it was even people who it could have been impacting, because they hadn't changed things to the point that it had actually taken hold yet.
No,
their old agreement was still active.
It was supposed to take control, I believe, 2024 was when that would kick in.
But it would have potentially put people like even Critical Role, people who make content.
The entire company of Critical Role, which is a big...
Yeah, lots of moving parts.
They have a CEO and stuff.
They have an animation deal now.
Yeah,
even.
They have branches. They have a publisher that like they own. They have a charity. They would have to give, I think it was like around 70% of proceeds or something like that. Or it was like a good chunk of proceeds past a certain limit, but they were definitely past.
Yeah.
Which does play into some new news that came around that I stumbled across in doing some research.
Okay, hit me with your best shot.
First, we need to go into what happened immediately after people were inside Wizards of the Coast were leaking information about, like, this new OGL is going out, they're changing it. Even the CEO of Kickstarter was like, hey, I'm trying to reduce it down from 25% of what you own at the beginning to 20% if you use Kickstarter. And people... Which
was like, he was trying to advocate for the people, not
for
the company.
He was like trying to cut down on that because there was only so much he could do.
Yeah.
But then Wizards was like, oh no, that was a test OGL that went out to get signatures and was documented by lawyers.
Hang on, that's Miko, our third host. He's the and.
Hi.
He's a wiener dog.
An overweight wiener dog.
Yeah, who's the best boy. And he is just swimming circles all over the carpet. He's having his best life.
Yeah. Back into the OGL.
Mm-hmm.
People were leaking it inside Wizards of the Coast to the public and being like, this is what's going on, this is what's going to happen. They are seriously... Like, how they were describing customers... I guess the guy who had been head of whatever division it was, I can't remember what it was, basically he would take feedback and help make the game.
Like customer relations or...
Yeah, he was...
Like,
he
data
was like,
gathering?
He was one of the head people on it. He retired about 3 months before all this broke out. But then, whenever all the stuff was going down, people were like, just so you know, since that guy left, no one has been listening to feedback. Like, on, like, the Unearthed Arcana, which is their, unofficial stuff that's like, hey, you can playtest this, give us feedback on your thoughts on...
So, like, on D&D Beyond, that's, like, check the... Like, there's a little thing you can check for playtest it or not fully finished out.
And that's the stuff. And then you can send feedback. They give you, like, a little form. It's like, what features did you like? What were your thoughts on this?
See, I know some things.
But apparently they were not checking those. They were, like, these people... They were, like, considering D&D fans know-it-alls, trying to tell them how to make their game. So the writing was on the wall.
To be fair, I do know Miko.
He found a ball.
I do know corporations where it does feel like the fans will just actually everything. However, that's usually just online discourse, not in a situation where someone's like, this isn't finished, please give us feedback. Usually you don't turn away the people you're asking for the feedback.
The guy who retired, he said that he always checked feedback on that stuff.
Makes sense, that's his job.
Yeah, and he made sure that they took it to heart. He said, this guy seemed like he was actually a stand person. He had been in it since, like, a part of Wizards since, like, the 80s. So he's, like, yeah, he earned his respect, and apparently he was pretty well respected by the fans before all this stuff.
Understandably.
The new guy who they're like, that people were like, hey, like, when Wizards was trying to backpedal, they're like, well, this is the guy who was in charge, he said that this was, that you guys would be okay with this. That guy had been in charge for 3 months. He did not have the authority, he did not have the ability, and there's no way he could have written up an entire legal document and sent it off to all those people in 3 months.
So he was being the fall guy.
Yeah, they made him as a scapegoat.
That sucks.
I'm certain he was well compensated for his time. But
I would hope so.
People bring out that it's like the heads in Hasbro and like stakeholders and stuff that were putting out things that was like, we're not making enough money off of this. And throughout all this, there were petitions like boycott the D&D movie and stuff like that.
Yeah, I saw there was a hashtag...
D&D Be Gone.
Yeah, which was a play on D&D Beyond. I saw that and I was like, guys, Twitter's mad, which, I mean, when is it not? But
yeah, there was also, what was it? There were 2 other details that I stumbled across. One was Paizo. Paizo. They're the people who own Pathfinder, the biggest competitor to that. Their sales went up quite a bit
I imagine.
in the wake of all this. And they were just like, D&D's for tabletop games are for everyone. You should always have your choice of brands. But it gets worse.
Worse?
There's a digital tabletop thing. And basically it's Skype with a dice roller built in. And you can...
Oh, I think I've seen people use that, actually, in the dorms.
Yeah, you can basically search whatever type of game you want to play, like a D&D, Dark Fantasy, Curse of Strahd, whatever. And you'll team up with like-minded people who want to play that game.
Oh.
And they'll be strangers, but you get to play the game.
That's actually a pretty cool service.
It looks like D&D was trying to get a monopoly on that, saying that you can't have, like, these things with D&D. And so people... And that's,
by the way, that's hurting the fans, because the more people are playing it, the more they're going to want to buy miniatures and, book bags.
Well,
and
they were
everything.
making their own, and they wanted you to subscribe to D&D Beyond, which, by the way, a D&D Beyond subscription is like, it's less than $10 a month.
Yeah. What does it include?
It includes...
Like the other races and stuff, I know. Or species, which do they call them?
It was races, but you don't necessarily get that content. You get extra content.
Wait, you don't get all of the races with D&D Beyond?
Not necessarily. With the subscription, you get access to, like, encounter builders, which are, like, just ways it'll show you how much XP your party should get for that. It gives you access to, initiative trackers, and occasional bonus content that they're playtesting. You just get access to it immediately.
That sounds like a lot less bang for the buck than I was imagining.
Yeah.
I think you get more character slots, too, for, like, you make
your
own
yeah,
player
that's true. You get infinite character slots to make characters. They were planning on jacking that up to $30 a month.
Whoa, wow.
Yeah.
They should at least have a tiered plan where it's like, look, you don't want to Skype with strangers. You don't want to do, like, you don't want to team up with randos, so you don't need to pay $30 for the stuff that you just want the basic stuff for you and your party that you hang out.
Well, that's like, I don't pay for D&D Beyond, and I still have fun.
Neither do I.
But also, they were planning on making it where creating your own content, like homebrew content using D&D Beyond, that would no longer be a feature for basic people. You'd have to pay the $30. I have made about 12 pages worth of homebrew content on D&D Beyond. And if they were like, sorry, now you need to pay money, I would just go to a different service.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of a lot of people were feeling.
Man, as much as I do the Stranger Things voice and I make fun of it because that's like the sort of zeitgeist's connection to it. Stranger Things and all the like 80s nostalgia crap, has made D&D like really culturally
Yeah,
relevant
it's
over the last
Stranger
decade.
Things and Critical Role that made the two biggest hits.
So by pissing off, like, they have all this goodwill, they have all this brand power, and it's slowly swelling, and because it didn't swell fast enough or high enough yet, they just started really doing dumb things.
Yeah, well, they want it because they've seen how much money Stranger Things was making, how much money
And they think
Critical
there's
Role was
some
making.
exact one-to-one correlation between one and the other.
And they think that they are entitled to part of that money. That was the real issue. So then the OGL, like, the person who initially leaked this information, her name was like Linda something.
Mm-hmm. Linda Hamilton, Terminator, yeah.
Sure, let's go with, she was...
Sarah Connor.
Yeah, it's Sarah Connor. She leaked the information.
This is Judgment Day, because we're judging them.
Sure. She leaked this information, and then she was active on Twitter, sort of giving out information as she could. Because technically although she was the one who broke the information, her sources on the inside that she was getting, she had not one, but like 8 different anonymous sources.
Like a network.
Yeah, and they were all being like, this guy just said this. And she was doing kind of what you did with DC and like the Snyder fans and the James Gunn fans, where you're just cataloging all that information. Whenever someone's like, well, they're not that bad, bloop, here's all the information saying.
Yeah.
And so on Twitter, she was kind of leading the charge, but other people quickly start doing their own investigations and getting like, so there were about 5 or 6 big people that were like saying, here's my network of sources that I've gotten, I can confirm this is what's happening.
Yeah.
So every time D&D Beyond would be like, hey, I have it's just this one guy, he was the one who made the decision. He's like, the guy's been there for 3 months, don't trust him, guy doesn't even have a parking space. And like, they would, and much like how D&D content is, they make one kind of okay thing, and the fans make 10 awesome things. And that kind of was going back and forth of, they were like, well, hey, we're not that bad. Can you remember us? We're Wizards of the Coast. We're your friends. And they're like, here's all the reasons we don't trust you. Like, people were hired, like, who had, like, friends that were lawyers. They were getting those lawyers to overlook the information and being like, legally they can do this, but it's extremely dubious. And also, like, why would you want to do that? So I feel like if that's what these amateur lawyers are saying, I feel like the professional lawyers are probably saying, why do you want to take off your fans?
Well, there's the, like, court of law, where obviously you set your precedent, you do everything else, you battle over trademark and fair use and blah, blah, blah. There's also the court of public opinion, which cares little to the finer details, and even if you come out, like, there have been tons of, like, celebrities and brands that were accused of things, disproved those, but the amount of time from initial accusation to proving their innocence, or at least that they were not the worst person in the scenario, their brand, their name, whatever, is already tarnished. I can't imagine someone at Hasbro looking at what's going on with D&D and saying, this is worth both the, like, actual courtroom stuff we could incur and just the way that we're going to piss off our fans and hurt the brand image.
Yeah. And this all went back and forth until eventually they were like, you know what, we're going to go back to the original OGL and we're going to hear your feedback on what changes need to be made. And you can put your feedback in our feedback system that we have on our webpage, the one that they don't check.
Yeah.
And we'll and people are like, why are you making changes? There's no, like, at most, put in a thing that says no NFTs.
Yeah. Pretty simple.
It should be 1.0B. Like, that should be with the little caveat of NFTs. And they're like, well, you know what? We're going to take your feedback and we're going to make an OGL that we can all be happy with. And it was real sketchy, obviously, because people were like, we don't want you to change it. You're the only one who wants to change this.
Yeah. And
then it was planned to go on till, I think, March, before February of 2023. I think it was like mid to late January. They were like,
well,
look,
when did we record the first part of this? Was it like a week ago or something? And then like the next day stuff started evolving?
Yeah, so it was like
the last week or so of January.
Yeah, and they were like, look, we know we said we were going to go for March, but we've heard your outcries, so we're just going to leave the OGL as it is, and we're going to make 5E a, let's see, common something license.
Creative Commons
license.
And so 5e is the current edition of D&D.
And so now, 5e is their current thing, and now it's Creative Commons, i.e., it's not theirs anymore. It's public use.
Yeah, like all the classical music they always put in the Looney Tunes because anyone can use it for free.
So they can't backpedal this. They've done it.
And it can't be undone.
Yeah.
So wait, when they say that 5e is Creative Commons fair use,
that includes, like the way the games play with D20s and stuff.
Yeah. So the gameplay mechanics,
the races, the classes, the backgrounds.
Okay. Like
everything,
the geographical areas.
No, the lore itself is still held by Wizards of the Coast, but the actual mechanics for playing the game.
So like you couldn't make a game where people fight Vecna in Dobbledydorf, Wildmount.
You were looking at the maps on my wall.
And like you couldn't do your fighting name character in name location without getting in trouble still.
Yeah.
Well, or you would fall under whatever they come to the agreement of going forward.
That's like, they made Vecna. However, there's nothing stopping you from making like a character that is very Vecna-like.
It's Krekva.
Or Vance, the anagram that they took and made Vecna.
I had a couple shoes by them.
Apparently Vance was a pulp fiction writer. Like he wrote like a whole bunch of pulp novels of like sci-fi and stuff. And so like, what if we named our big bad after him? And they just rearranged the letters. People were like, okay, you've saved about 15% of your goodwill that you had at the start of this.
I mean, as an outsider, like not being in like the nitty gritty, like this isn't the sort of like movie pop culture side of things is sort of my battle zone where I'm like, what do you like? I know the named players in corporations that most people don't care about, and they shouldn't care about it. It's totally fine.
Yeah.
As someone who's on the opposite side of it now, where you're the guy who knows everything and I'm the dummy, to continue with the alliteration. For me, having not seen every crime and stupid thing they've said, and obviously not all the things they've been outed for doing on Twitter, I'm like, Creative Commons, that seems like a huge win, because I know that you and I were both talking about making D&D-esque alternatives, and we were, I mean, from a creative standpoint, we wanted to be different just to be the validity of even existing. But then also we were worried that if any system we had was too similar, they might chase us.
Well, even then, it wasn't just like, I'm making something that's D&D related, like I'm making a book that goes for D&D.
Yeah.
A YouTuber who talks about D&D, their stuff would fall under that, oh, you make money off of us?
Yeah.
And I think there's the phrase, the bigger the fish, the bigger the parasites, or like the more the parasites. And that
works.
And that's kind of how they viewed their fans for a while, I guess, some of them, the higher-ups, because apparently there was a huge movement that was like a lot of the people at Wizards were actually planning on walking if they actually went through with this.
Oh.
So they were like if you're like gonna do this, like we won't stand for.
I really wish more corporations actually had like a strong, not even if it's not like the people in charge necessarily, or if it's not like the spine or the heart or whatever anatomical analogy you want to make of the company, just enough of like a passionate, moral fan base that works there because they love what they're doing, that when someone crosses a threshold, like morally or ethically, they're like, no, and if you won't see what's wrong with this, we're going to hobble your business and force you to follow what you should be doing morally.
Yeah, I compared this whole like backpedaling to the Sonic movie redesign.
Yeah.
Where I was like, oh, we made this thing, and people were like, change it, and they basically cyberbullied an entire company.
Yeah, but that's another thing I'd like to get into is you can't really bully a major multi-million-dollar corporation. People like to be. You can bully people there, which isn't right, but you cannot bully a corporation.
Well, you can hurt the thing they care about, which is their bottom line.
Well, yeah, you can basically take away their source of income, which makes them start caring, but that's not bullying people because they have severance packages that are better than we'll make in a year that was working.
The people who were designing it, at least with the Sonic movie, it was the case of like, this looks like garbage, and they were like, yeah, it does look like garbage. You guys deserve better. And those people took time, and they managed to convince the higher-ups to let them delay it.
It was worth the sort of cost analysis said that they'll make more.
They got a sequel out of it, and
they're making a threequel.
Good for them.
It better have Shadow, and he better be Keanu Reeves. Or John Bernthal. I have very strong opinions on Shadow the Hedgehog and Knuckles.
Whatever. But then, and that's the thing, if we had done this episode, like, yesterday or the day before, this would be the end of it. And, like D&D Beyond, like, Wizards of the Coast, they've screwed over their fans.
Yeah.
Potentially for, like, they showed their true colors, but now fans are kind of on edge around them.
Mm-hmm.
But
the trust has been
but now
tested.
The power is in the hands of the fans, and hopefully that will help to rebuild things.
Oh, so you're saying that it would have been hopeful if we'd done this the other day, and now it isn't.
It's interesting now.
Okay.
Okay, so this is going to be a weird tangent.
Okay. When are they normal?
Critical Role is doing the animated show on Amazon.
Yeah.
For Vox Machina.
Mm-hmm.
They did, whenever they were, like, doing that whole thing, they were doing interviews and stuff, promoting it. And at one point, the person interviewing them was like, hey, how would you feel if you did, like, a Mighty Nine spinoff, the Campaign 2, instead of just Campaign 1, go Campaign 2? Travis Willingham, CEO of Critical Role.
Really?
Yeah.
Good for him.
He's tall. He was like, oh, man, that'd be rad if we did that. Or, like, that'd be awesome. Then, 2 days later, they announced that they had been working on it for a while. And it's an official thing. Amazon's going to be putting it out of that.
Wait, what's the story of Mighty Nine versus the...
The Mighty Nine is fighting Vecna.
Okay, Mighty Nine is fighting Vecna. Wait, which one's the...
Or no, Vox Machina is fighting Vecna. Mighty Nine is Wildmount and basically fighting in Mordor.
Okay, yeah, because I know about when Joe Mango showed up as Arcan.
That's Vox Machina.
That was the first time I watched any of their stuff.
Which, if they do a third season, presumably will be the Vecna arc, and they will get...
Okay, I will be there for Vecna. I'm not really into the sort of irreverent Rick and Morty type of humor that they've gone with, but if you have Joe Mango's as a dragon, I'm there.
Yeah. Not only that, but I guess we'll get to see his brother's character as well, because it wasn't just Arcan shows up, it was his entire party shows up.
That's true.
But they had been, like, killed. And apparently they had, like, a white dragon or something that...
and we won't spoil any of, like, the major plot points.
Yeah, but his brother's character was playing an elf, but he was, like, the only person Arcan ever gone close to, and it was, like, a brother to him. And then show up and he's dead. And zombified, and they have to be like, now he's like, I'm gonna kill Vecna.
Yeah, pretty good. See, I love that Joe can make he's like, yeah, it's dragons and demons, it's death metal. I'm like, oh, I always thought it was like nerds and leotards, but you're right, it is pretty metal.
Yeah.
Like, he was a really big entry point for me being like, maybe I should give D&D kind of a second glance and look at it, because I'm much more of a sci-fi guy, but I do love...
He's weirdly a bigger nerd than Tobey Maguire, the person he was bullying in Spider-Man.
Yeah, I know. I'm physically a bigger nerd, too. Like, the dude is built. R.I.P. him getting to play Deathstroke.
But, back to the topic. Travis Willingham was like, oh, that'd be so cool if we did that. 2 days later, they announced it.
Yeah.
Recently, they were being interviewed by, I believe, Sarah Connor, same lady.
Linda.
Yeah, she was like, hey, what are your thoughts on all of this OGL content and stuff? And it was before, like, they had backpedaled a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
You see Matt Mercer's hand tense up on the hand? And all this is highlighted on a guy, YouTube channel, Bob the World Builder. He broke down the entire thing because the audio quality is not great.
Yeah.
So he kind of went through, cleaned it up, and highlighted certain elements. He went full detective, kind of conspiracy theorist on this.
I can respect it.
And Marisha was there, Matt Mercer's wife. She's like, oh, yeah, we just care a lot about the fans and stuff. And Linda doesn't let it go. It's like, what if you guys made your own thing? Matt is like, oh, that'd be rad if we did that. But we would need to team up with the right people. We need to make sure that it feels like Critical Role.
Yeah. And
Marisha, out of nowhere, brings up their publishing company, Darrington Press, that they have. And it's like, yeah, so we really... And she kind of starts... They clearly are dancing around something.
Mm-hmm.
And then... So, like, it all kind of spirals down to people being like, are they working on their own tabletop thing? They said, if we were working on it, it would take years of work. So, basically, it was them saying, we're a couple of years out of the way, but yes, we are working on it. Making our own tabletop RPG for Critical Role.
I have to say, I am genuinely interested because I think publicly, Matt Mercer, who is my, like, second favorite Luke Skywalker of all time.
Yeah.
He's probably the most famous, like, guy hiding behind a piece of cardboard telling people how much poison they've taken. I always forget if people are going to call it a DM or a GM.
Both are okay.
I'm going to call him a BDSM. And
Big dogs and small dogs.
And like he's publicly put a lot of work and effort. He's like the Michael Jordan of fantasy, like guiding people through adventures.
Yeah.
So I'm curious what his like wealth of knowledge of this could be optimized. This isn't great. This is something you should stick to. Like, what is his version of...
Well, that's like, even Critical Role, the show, while playing 5e, there are house rules at play. Taking a potion as a bonus action.
Wasn't Blood Hunter something...
That's entirely his.
What's the thing that Vin Diesel invented?
I am not... I assume it's called a Witch Hunter.
Well, it's... The Last Witch Hunter is based on his D&D character.
I know they're pulling for, like, a similar thing of, like...
What just... Literally, if you pulled his Witch Hunter character and you sucked it into the
5e rules.
Yeah, what would that be? Like,
that would probably be a Blood Hunter, just because the Blood Hunter is literally supposed to be the Witcher, because that Matt Mercer loves the Witcher.
Interesting.
He loves the books, which, by the way,
I wonder if Henry Cavill would ever show up in there.
Potentially.
Imagine him and Joe Mango's doing another Jox Machina.
Yeah.
Which wasn't the Big Show in one of those?
I know Travis Willingham was in one of those. I'm not as familiar with Jox Machina.
Okay, because that's funny, because that's the thing that I was like, maybe I'll give it a shot. I was like, I don't know if I want to be around nerds, and so then there's like Jox Machina. I'm like, hell yeah, okay, I'll try that one out. I feel a little bit less weird watching these jacked dudes. It's like a 300 movie. It's like, yeah, they're all in their Speedos, but they're jacked guys, so it's okay for me to be here.
Yeah, and it's... But, like, the idea that Matt Mercer might potentially make things, that would be one of the two pillars holding D&D in the mainstream collapsed if Critical Role left.
Well, it could be like with us where we had talked about in the past, like, what if we did, like, we would homebrew our own stuff, and we were helping our, third co-host for this sometimes, Sam, make a Resident Evil thing, and the thing he really wanted to get right was scavenging, like, survival mechanics, like scavenging for ammunition, recapturing the feeling of the Resident Evil games, and so... But then when the first OGL controversy hit, we were like, why don't we just pull the trigger and actually make our own stuff and flesh out the rules in the world and make our own fantasy, sci-fi, apocalypse, whatever.
Well, then, what was interesting, outside of Pathfinder getting a whole bunch of things, there was, 5 years ago, recently, a new tabletop game hit the shelves called Blades in the Dark, and it's basically...
I feel like you've talked to me about
that. You were driving at the time, but it's like diesel punk fantasy, but it's all like, oh, you have to stay inside the city because ghosts are wandering around. We have a field that keeps them out, and then you're robbing stuff. But their system is like really good.
So it's not entirely dissimilar from Paul Bettany's movie Priest, where there are big cities that keep you safe from the vampires.
It's actually shockingly close.
It's a really good movie.
But yeah, like that came out for like 5 years ago, and now people are like toying around with it. Call of Cthulhu, still a big thing. Pathfinder, and so like, and that's something Marisha brought up in that interview, was like, the more competitors you have makes the whole area stronger.
That's the point of capitalism, is that no one can ever become a monopoly, because they're all, ideally kept in check somewhat on a minor level by government, but mostly by competition of just all the hungry hippos are at the same watering hole.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes this whole thing very interesting, the fact that it's like, people are like, no, we're not going to do that.
The only problem is sometimes you get a gold rush situation like streaming services, where then, it's a slightly different situation, because they're basically third-party vendors trying to license the rights for existing properties, so everyone saw wealth and wanted in on it, versus, I think if everyone tries to compete with D&D after this, you could get a couple cash grab, soulless, failures. But I do think that, especially the one of Matt Mercer is working on one.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see a lot of fans who just genuinely are passionate and are like, you know what, I could do this, because I won't screw up as bad as Wizards.
Critical Role, they will 100% keep the power in the hands of the people.
Yeah.
Because, their organization, broken up loosely, they have merchandise, they have the actual company itself, they have the Critical Role Foundation, which is a charity organization run by Asha Johnson, not Johnson & Johnson, but the person. They have advertising, sponsorships, they have all these different...
They're a proper corporation.
Yeah, they are like an official thing that has like different branches and things under their umbrella.
Yeah.
So if they're like, we want to make a tabletop RPG, they've already made board games and novels and audiobooks.
Yeah. So they have practice building off of existing framework.
Yeah, they've published 3 books through Wizards of the Coast themselves. Or they published 2 through Wizards of the Coast, and then a third one through Darrington Press, which is their own publisher. Admittedly, it wasn't able to perform as well just because it was, whenever that book came out, it was just real hard to get your hands on because they didn't make enough of them. So they were pretty hard to get your hands on.
Well, this kind of just reminds me of like Sam Raimi and Zack Snyder, because again, going back to my movie roots of just like Sam Raimi couldn't get the rights to
Evil Dead?
No, strange enough, he kept having to... No Evil Dead is directly tied to the previous movie for some stupid reason, because studios. But whenever he made Darkman, he couldn't get the rights to Batman or The Shadow, so he just made his own character. And then Zack Snyder did that, like, I have this Old Republic idea for a movie. And then he watched Disney buy Lucasfilm. He's like, oh, well, Disney won't want someone like me. George Lucas might have. And so he just kind of sat on it. And then he was like, I'll just make my own. I'll change it, and I'll sort of reinterpret it and make it a new thing.
I get Rebel Moon, which we're stoked for.
Very. Because, again, like I said, even if people don't end up liking Rebel Moon, or if people didn't like Darkman, or all these other sort of, I like this thing, but I want to do my own version, it creates, it's a testing ground. It's the scientific method. You see what is a cool new thing that other things should start doing as well, and what are things that maybe didn't work out so well. Yeah. And I feel like with the idea of, like, Matt Mercer and all of those people over there at Critical Role becoming something that competes, that doesn't mean that they won't still do D&D content, because I'm sure they wouldn't give it up wholesale, at least not immediately. But I don't think they would wholesale ever. But I could see them ending a campaign and be like, and our next campaign is in a new setting, and it's our thing, and it could be like,
well, even then, while Wildmount is technically, like, accepted into the Wizards of the Coast family, Matt still owns it.
Yeah, because he invented...
Yeah, he invented a lot of, like, the entire landmass of Exandria, which includes Tal'Dorei, Wildmount, the whole planet, basically.
Wait, is it a planet? Is it a crystal sphere of reality? Is it a...
Crystal sphere, technically, but, like, the entire world, although it pulls from Forgotten
I'm still
Realms.
not entirely sure if a crystal sphere is a galaxy, a planet, or a continent.
Imagine a planet, but it has its own heaven and hell.
Okay, so they're the marbles from Men in Black.
Yes.
Okay.
Where... Because basically it's the reason...
Not to be confused with the locker from Men in Black 2.
Because imagine if you died and it's like, oh, sorry, hell's in a different dimension. Like, you have to go to, like, an entirely different world. All the hell... Like, every planet has the same hell. That would be a nightmare.
Yeah. That's also, like, as funny as it is, like, that's confusing because you have every, tabletop adventure party has their own, basically reality where things play out slightly differently. That's still less confusing than the way that DC Comics actually does their multiverse, and they're all one company in charge of all of it. So it's just funny that fans and all of their chaos are somehow easier to understand than major corporations.
Yeah. If all this stuff, like, although, like, Matt made Exandria, he could totally be like, okay, there's instead, like, he can totally take what he has for Exandria. He could make a new world. He probably won't because he owns still. He could probably say, like, yeah, I'm going to license out Exandria to the Critical Role, company.
Yeah.
And they will get access. They can't use D&D content.
Yeah.
Like, so Vecna's gone.
Yeah.
But things like Asmodeus, the devil in hell, and all the demons of the hells, they're technically public domain still.
Really? Because
Asmodeus is like mythologies.
I thought it was Asmodeus.
It's either or.
I've heard it both ways.
Yeah. But like those things, they're technically public domain because it's just the name of a demon, with a characterization of it's a devil or something. So that technically there's nothing stopping you from taking that character or a character very similar with the same name, with the same job, same location, and putting it in your thing. So Matt is kind of in a very interesting position where now he doesn't have to give up 5e, but because now it's public domain, but also like
he can tweak whatever he wants.
I feel like because he is such a completionist and such a little, he's a little hermit nerd, basically. Like, if you give him, it's like, oh no, you give him like some grid paper and stuff and leave him to his own, he will do something weird and crazy and creative, and he'll want to show it off. So the idea of, hey, don't you want to make your own tabletop game? I'm certain, even if he didn't have to,
Well, he's salivating at it.
Now the thoughts in his head, he will not be able to get it out of his beautifully woven hair until it's done.
Like, I'm more of like a Warhammer guy, so which, you know, they do have RPGs, like straight up role-playing games, and they obviously have like the battle simulator element of the actual tabletop, and there's narrative gameplay, but it's not the same as a D&D type of party narrative situation for the most part.
Yeah.
And so like I've done part of a Curse of Strahd playthrough and a couple of one-shots that were usually supposed to lead to something else, and then schedules always got screwed up. So, like, I have not a lot of tabletop RPG experience, and the idea of, like, take this thing, fix the things you didn't like, don't screw up the things you did like, and just go crazy with the world building, that's exciting for me.
Yeah.
Matt Mercer outclasses me on the nerd scale to the point of it's like he's like Dr. Manhattan. I mean, I can only imagine how much he tries to fall asleep at night, and it's just like, I should write that down.
Oh, yeah.
He's got to have a nightstand journal at this point. Like, there's no way he doesn't have a scratch pad with just insane ramblings.
Yeah, well, apparently part of the Critical Role studio, at least a part of it, is just shelves and tables and stuff where he keeps the minis and maps that he has, like, physical battle maps.
Yeah.
Where he paints them and keeps them hidden from other players and stuff.
I was hoping you were going to say rooms for napping so you could come up with good ideas.
No.
I would put that in my company.
Apparently, this was a thing in Campaign 2, because it was around that time when Marisha and Matt got married. Mm-hmm. They were like, for one thing, their cake had them as D&D minis on top of it fighting off zombies.
That makes sense.
That were climbing the cake. But also, whenever they were doing a map, there were, like, cake pop stands in, like a battle map during Campaign 2. Mm-hmm. And she was like, I saw those in the Amazon cart. I thought those were for our wedding. And it was like, no, it's for his map. It's for his game. He's a delightful person.
He seems super duper chill, and like the type of person that I feel like, I don't know, there are just some people who have like an innate kindness that they just sort of emanate. Like, they're nice people who, like, you wouldn't expect to be nice people. Like, they have like an angry face, just resting, or like, you know, Matt, he's just one of those people that, like, you look at him and you're like, that guy, he's probably a pretty nice guy. And then he lives up to it.
There was definitely an issue with, whenever they were talking about, like, what are your thoughts on D&D and the new OGL stuff? Like, Marisha was clearly trying to repeat the official statement.
Yeah.
But it was clear that she was like, I'm ticked off by this. Matt was like, well, because he's just a nice person. I think he has frustration in him, but I think he's just like...
Could you imagine if you ever saw him get mad at you? Like, that would probably, like, devastate you. Yeah. Like that time Tom Hanks yelled at a guy, and you'd be like, oh.
Yeah.
You're the guy that he got mad at. You're the only one we've ever seen him get mad at. What's wrong with you?
It'd be like making Bob Ross cry. You would just feel awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, but...
He should, by the way, I would totally watch a Critical Role, like, Bob Ross style Matt Mercer painting minis and explaining
the
backstory.
They did a show on Critical Role for a while called Mini Primetime, where it was basically like them showing different painting techniques with Will Friedle.
Yeah, Batman Beyond. I watched a little bit of that.
Apparently, the idea was that he
knew nothing
about painting, and he was learning his skills up the...
He's stealing my gimmick. I'm the idiot for D&D. I'm the Batman Beyond.
Well, he showed his first mini he ever made, like, painted. He painted it with Sharpie. It looked awful.
Yeah, it sounds like my first Warhammer minis, where I was like, primer? Why pay for regular primer? I'll just get cheap house primer. And then they were just gooped. And I was like, oh, that's why. Mm-hmm. You learn. You learn.
But it's interesting that basically Wizards of the Coast has been... they've made God bleed. And so now people are ceasing to believe in wizards. And they're like, we could just make our own stuff. And admittedly...
We cut Xerxes' face, and now the world knows he isn't a god king.
Yeah. What was it? There's a YouTuber called Jordan, but there's a PH before the D. The PH is silent. He has been making his own world because that's basically the level that every D&D player gets to. Like, I like this world. I like this adventure. I want to make my own.
Yeah.
It's sort of an entropic result of playing.
Well, it's interesting because, like, when you write a book or a script or a story, you make the world, but then you have to do the hard thing of the dialogue and the character, whereas it's actually, it sounds weird. It's still difficult, but in a weird way, it's almost easier to come up with a campaign narrative and, like,
you don't have
the bullet points.
And also, if it's like, it's kind of like Will Friedle said about Batman Beyond, was the fact that, like, if you're playing Batman, people are going to be like, that's not Batman. But if you're playing Batman Beyond, it's the new character. Everything you do is what the character would do.
Yeah.
And so, whenever you're playing a character like Manchun, who's like, he's like a character who has some serious history in adventures and stuff like that. There's an entire war that was run just by him.
He's not a large wave of water?
No.
Okay.
Or like if you're playing Manchun, other characters are going to be like, other players might be like, that's not what he would act like. That's not what he do. Why wouldn't he do this? He's done that before. But when you make a character that's original,
yeah,
with the same abilities and even maybe a similar backstory, you're like, whatever, it's my thing.
Which is
what Matt did. He did. There's a character named a wizard who's called Halaster Blackhand or something like that. Kind of Saruman. Then he had in Critical Role, there's a character named Halas that's clearly Halaster, except he looks different, and he did some crazier stuff to try and solve the similar problem. And it led to like this whole thing where people are like, this character's really interesting. To where now, if they were like, we're going to make a novel about him, people would probably get it. So he abandoned, and also instead of looking like evil Gandalf with like a black cane next to him, he looked like a character from Underworld in terms of sexiness. Because like, why wouldn't you want him to look hot?
Because it just makes me think of one of the big reasons that going back to like the whole like Rebel Moonism is like after everyone actually the bejesus out of like the DC movies, Zach was just like, I mean, I could still pursue this as an official Star Wars thing, but it would be really nice to have people not be able to actually me, especially when people would be like, actually Batman wouldn't, and they're like, that's the thing. That's from the comic panel. That's from the thing. And they're like, well, I don't remember that, and I interpreted it differently. And you're like, well, now you're splitting hairs.
That's not really what he was like. That was when they didn't really have pinned down what the character was. And
it's one of those things, I won't go on a tangent of like, oh, an Elseworld story shouldn't count, but I love All-Star Superman. I love All-Star Superman too, but it's a fucking Elseworld. It's not the main continuity.
Yeah. You see stuff with like the Wachowskis. They've made like 5 movies in total about, like, including the Animatrix.
Oh, specific to the Matrix franchise.
Yeah. They've made those 5 movies, and people still are like, wow, they're like, we want to do this thing. People are like, duh, he wouldn't do that. And it's like, literally,
yeah, they made them.
These are the 2 people. These characters live inside their heads. They sprouted from that. They know what materials went in.
Exactly.
I was talking about a similar thing with Sam, and he was like, talk about the George Lucas knowing Star Wars, and Freddie Prinze Jr. just going on a rant about it. Like, this is what it is. These are not my words. This is George Lucas. You can take it up with him.
Yeah, he's the god of that crystal sphere. You armed me with that one term in the first episode, and I have clung to it for dear life.
Yeah. So
I mostly imagine them as snow globes.
Apparently they look like ruby spheres, almost.
That's really weird.
It's like a layer of ruby that goes around the entire thing. Like,
oh, it's like Cyclops' eyes. Ruby stops it.
No, but apparently you can break them.
Wait, you can break a world?
You can break a crystal sphere, yeah, and the world basically Galactus dies.
Is there a dark side of, like, the D&D multiverse that just shatters realities? Because that would be pretty dope.
If there isn't, you can totally make one.
I'm 100% making one. That sounds awesome.
I know, apparently in Spelljammers there's an area, it's like, oh, this is littered with the debris of broken crystal spheres. And it's like storms of crystal shards that
by the way, probably the next episode we're going to do, we still have not got to do a Spelljammers thing. And I picked up some vintage comics, and I sent the image to you.
Yeah, and it was like, Spelljammers.
Yeah, I was like, what in the sweet 7 hells is this? And because it's, goofy 80s, 90s.
Yeah, the ships look like snails.
Yeah. So I'm like, I have more questions than I've ever had before. I was so excited because you're like, it's like space type of stuff. I'm like, I love space. And then I was like, why are they all in leotards? So,
Yeah,
hopefully you can shed light on the way that's evolved and changed.
I intentionally did redesigns of those things.
And what website would they be able to find some of your redesigns on?
Currently none of them, because I haven't posted any of the redesigns to the website yet.
What's the website name? That's the plug. So what's the name of that website?
It's D&DummiesPodcast.wordpress.com.
How do you spell that?
It's the letter D, and the word and, the 3-letter word and then dummies, and .wordpress.com.
To be fair, there's like 3 ways to spell D&D, so I just wanted to make that clear for everyone.
So, yeah, I'll need to...
And that's probably where, as you develop your own fantasy system, updates will be shared and such.
Yeah.
Which we need to start putting links to these videos and podcasts on that as well for the listeners and viewer.
Yeah, but I'm lazy.
Which is why I've been helping.
Yeah. And also I'm terrible at podcasts.
Which is why I've been helping. If I was good enough for Hot Wheels, I think I can handle Crystal Spheres.
Don't.
To be fair, Crystal Spheres have treated me better than some of the people at Hot Wheels.
Yeah.
Love the brand. Just 2 or 3 people I would never want to have lunch with again.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll probably want to do... I know we also said that we wanted to do an undead sort of...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that's the... For those listening, I don't even know what really even spurred this, frankly. I was just like, I want to make my own D&D thing. And normally I go cyberpunk or sci-fi, but something possessed me to be like, what if the zombie apocalypse wasn't a one-trick pony and it was as fleshed out with characters and stories and places to go and monsters of variation as an actual D&D setting?
Yeah.
And, like 2 weeks later, I have information and it's set in an outbreak in what is supposed to be Miami, but I've changed it to Sunset City to sort of be an amalgam of it.
Yeah.
And, like the Miami Dolphins are now the Florida Flamingos, so that way I can operate out of their football stadium as a base for one of the villages. And
yeah,
I've done all this stuff.
It was just world building an entire thing that could be for a video game tabletop.
It honestly came shockingly easy, despite me never trying to do anything about this, because I have it where Cape Canaveral's in Florida, so you can have how'd the infection get here? Was it from space? Was it from the swamps? Was it from government facilities? And I don't know about everyone else, but I think after the pandemic that we've actually lived through, I'm kind of burned out on this flu then took over and caused I can't do that anymore. I got to come up with a fun, different way to be gross.
That's why I liked Red Dead Redemption's whole thing.
Yeah, the Aztec curse.
Yeah, it was guy stole a mask from an Aztec tomb, and now
so cool.
all the dead rose.
I'm so pissed that we have still not gotten Undead Nightmare 2. Imagine if they just did vampires this time. Every Undead Nightmare was just different protagonist, different horror movie trope.
Yeah, that would be cool. I don't know if I'd want them to do...
Well, I think vampires was just what everyone was assuming, because there's a vampire you can fight in Red Dead Redemption 2 campaign.
Yeah, there's a werewolf you can fight in GTA 5.
That's true.
So...
Wild West versus werewolves would be pretty rad.
Yeah.
I'm totally fine with cooking up a...
Did we just invent the Order 1886?
Yeah, a little bit. But we came up with the American version, and this time it won't just be cutscenes with QuickTime events. Man, that world was so cool, though.
Yeah.
Such a letdown.
I would have loved to see a graphic novel series set in that world.
Yeah, just books, anything. I mean, it's...
I'm reading the Powder Mage trilogy, and that's basically the same thing, where it's humans with flintlock stuff, and then also there's some magic.
Anyway, yeah, so, I don't know, I think this is, I think the same way, and again, I'm just, going on my back foot of the things that I'm already familiar with. When I think of, comic book creators got screwed in the 80s and 90s, we got Image Comics and things got better. We got competition and we got new ideas, and it reinvigorated the entire genre.
Yeah.
I look at Wizards of the Coast, maybe they're going to screw the pooch still, but they've lit a fire that is causing new creatives to go out and push boundaries and make their own thing and start spinning the wheels of well, why don't we? And I think that we're going to see a lot of cool things spin out of what would normally be seen as a negative. I think it could potentially be a net positive for people who love tabletop RPGs.
Yeah, and
At least I hope so.
And that's kind of something interesting that's kind of come from, like, Blades in the Dark, definitely, like, it's only been out for 5 years, but it has been crushing it.
Really?
Like, you can, because you're all criminals, you can be one guy who's, like, the mastermind leader.
We've always been criminals, Alfred. Nothing's changed.
But, you can be, like, someone's like, okay, I want to pick the lock, but you as the leader could be like, hey, pick that lock, and they get a bonus to it. Because you gave them, or it's like, oh, I failed, and instead of getting the repercussions on it, you take the repercussions on it.
That's interesting.
So it's a way you kind of look out and help. You're a support class, but you're the leader.
That's actually a really cool way to make the support class. That's actually a really... Oh, man, my brain is, like, fizzing because that's such a effective use of, like, leadership. And leadership isn't a support class in real life when you think about it.
Yeah, and that's like one thing they did. They did a million things that were just
That's
like
really smart.
really interesting. For one thing, your character doesn't really have a health bar. It's like a weird health system. It's really
We'll have to... Well, you know what? We'll do Spelljammers and we'll do Blades in the Dark. We'll do Blades in the... I would have assumed it was about vampires or something.
I think vampires might be in it. They're definitely ghosts that you can, like, commune with and make do things.
But yeah, we'll have to do that. And whenever the D&D movie comes out, we'll go see that and we'll talk about the D&D movie. I'll go in it as the idiot who knows almost nothing about D&D. For a general audience member, is it good or bad? And you come at it with someone who knows all this stuff, who will say, hey, they really screwed the pooch, and D&D fans will or will not probably like that.
Back to that Jordan with a PH. He's been making his own world, and whenever he was talking about it on, like, live streams and stuff, just, like, world building, and people were like, are you going to make a book that maybe we can buy of this world? Because it seems really interesting. And the whole premise for his world is, like, warlocks literally just make a deal, and then they get magic. Why would anyone study books when you can literally just say, hey, give me magic, and I'll give you something in return?
Oh, I was studying. So, like, study books as in not learn magic from books.
Yeah,
I thought you were meaning, like, people don't know how to spell or write, but they know magic. So, they're just illiterate wizards.
No, but, like, instead of spending years studying all this
does...
stuff, why would... And so the idea is that the government is basically run by these powerful warlocks and stuff, and each of them has sort of a different...
Well, maybe we'll do a whole episode on that. We'll line that up in the queue.
Yeah, put that in with, like, interesting fan-made world designs that are...
Yeah, we can highlight, like, 3 to 5 interesting ones and see how many we can knock out.
Well, that's the thing. Jordan did a whole... It was over a month. He did 30-day world building where, over the span of 30 days, you build a world that you know like the back of your hand.
Wow.
Down from, like,
I've never heard...
here's the cosmos, down to here's, like, the notable heroes in the history of, like, these towns.
That's like the Inktober of world building, or the what's the writing challenge? We have to write a short story in that. You know what I'm talking about, though, right?
Oh.
That was big when we started college.
Yeah, I can't remember what.
But it's like,
I remember I wanted to do it.
I've never heard of the RPG world building equivalent. But that's a cool concept.
I'll send you a link to it, because basically every time me and Sam have been like, I kind of want to build a world, we would just go back to those videos and being like, because he actually used.
Wait, he says how to?
He said, well, that's like he was building his own world at the time, and so he's walked through it, but he's actually using 2 different monthly world builders, and he's answering 2 questions a day.
Oh, so it's a system that exists, not just a challenge.
Well, yeah, it's like a challenge, but also it's like, today, what's like the galaxy of your world? What are the laws of physics?
Absolutely send that to me. So we'll have to do like fan-made stuff. Maybe we'll do a Call of Cthulhu episode, actually, because I know Sam was really big into that. He might be the D for that one, and we'll be the dummies.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about it. I remember
he did like
I do know from one person saying he wanted to do Call of Cthulhu, but Indiana Jones world, like use that game system. He said, "Don't do that.
You die easy."
Yeah, you're not meant to get shot at that much by Nazis.
Doing Undead Wood, Call of Cthulhu,
which apparently Undead Wood is called like something Reloaded. I can't remember what. Apparently,
that was just the name of like the critical thing. Anyway, but yeah, so like. We're gonna start. We're not just gonna cover D&D proper, and it's not just because they kind of screwed the pooch that we're getting into other things.
Deadlands Reloaded.
Also,
there's Shadowrun, which is the fantasy world is cyberpunk.
And we can also talk about the actual cyberpunk tabletop at some point if you feel so.
Oh, that's right. I know nothing about that.
Maybe I'll research that one, and I'll be the D, and you'll be the dummy.
Yeah, I think that'd probably be for the best because I know.
I'm a huge Mike Pondsmith nerd.
I know you said Johnny Silverhand was originally blonde.
Yeah, he was David Bowie. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but Yeah, it's sort of. I think they've retconned it to be like Elvis, where he just started dyeing his hair after a while.
Well, it's like The Man Who Sold the World. That song was written by David Bowie, so imagine the cyberpunk equivalent.
I really like the world building, and it doesn't perfectly align with the tabletop universe, but also it totally does because there's unreliable narrators, and I'll get into that. I'm now super excited to talk about that. You definitely need to send me that link, though, for the challenge.
Yeah.
I am so deep into this tabletop building system.
The first episode starts slow, but the methods are like, write down every possible biome you can think of. Where it's like, Miami coastal, swamp,
I'm talking to people in
forest.
Miami and Florida actually to get their input on what they've liked and disliked about the way Miami's been portrayed and what people miss about it in order to get it. Because although I'm going for an exaggerated, silly, caricatured, nondescript sunset city, I still want people who are from there to be like, cool, and people who aren't from there to be like, cool.
I will say, its system was made for making, like, a fantasy world, so you might be like, how's the magic work? And like, eh.
I'll just make it, how does the infection work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really good system. It's like 30 videos.
So yeah, we've got a lot to look forward to at D&Dummies. Be sure to check out the website. Be sure to check out the podcast which you're listening to, or the video. You might be watching this on YouTube. But we're also a podcast. We're videos. There's probably going to be some more videos that are just you talking about things.
Yeah, I want to do a video talking about a Sararak and his whole origin, because I did a article on the website, Sararak the Unappreciated. That was like a third of what makes a Sararak good.
Yeah, I remember you showing me like, hey, is this too long for an article? I was like, maybe. It's a bit of a wordy one.
Yeah.
Puts the word in WordPress.
Yeah, so I wanted to be like, I want to take all that stuff, put it into a video, and just be like...
Yeah. So probably the best place is we're going to be more accurate about posting all this stuff on the D&Dummies website. So it'll be character redesigns, updates on his separate RPG development, links to the podcast and the videos as they drop. The podcast usually comes out an hour to a day ahead of the video version of this that you'll get on like YouTube and stuff, even though Spotify really wants us to put video versions of the podcast on their platform. But I'm like, I'm not turning you into Netflix. That's not how this works. I'm not Joe Rogan. We're not doing that. So, at least not at this point. Maybe when we get in a big schmoozy studio and we get narcissistic and we want to see our faces and we have stylists, maybe I'll,
Yeah, when we get that kind of funny screen background.
I do really like their screen background. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for listening. I've been the dummy.
I'm not.
Be sure to roll with advantage out there, guys.
No, we're not ending on that. We're not.